"You worthless woman. You are good for nothing. If only you had given me a son, I would have forgiven you. I wouldn't have complained about anything ever again, but even that, you cannot do." My husband pushed me, and I fell to the ground outside the door. My daughter was standing in front of me, who has now become very understanding and learned how to grasp everything. She had seen me being beaten by her father before. Today her eyes were teary again, and my heart was pounding thinking of all she had to witness. But what I saw today surprised me beyond words. When I saw what she held in her hands, it felt as if the ground beneath my feet shifted. Holding it with both hands, she came up to me and said, "Here, take this, Mum." My husband was outside at that time. Whatever little thing that the girl had brought, watch the video till the end to find out. And friends, do like the video, subscribe to her channel if you are new, and click the bell icon. Let's get started. I might be the worst daughter in the world. That's probably why, without much thought, my parents married me off to a man who views women only as childbearing machines, someone who has no respect for women. Maybe because I was a bad daughter, I ended up in a household where I was not respected. I didn't want to be a bad mother. When Allah blessed me with a daughter for the second time, my elder daughter had already grown up a bit. I wanted to send her to school. Despite fights and arguments with my family, I managed to send her to school. My mother-in-law said, "What will she do after passing the 10th grade?" But my intention was never to just let her finish 10th grade. My daughter was excellent in her studies and performed well in school, but the pressure was getting to her brain. Seeing her father abusing me verbally every day, my husband argued with me daily. After having 2 daughters, there was something wrong with me. I could not get pregnant again. Hence, my husband started calling me barren. One day I snapped back saying, "If I am barren, then how did these 2 daughters come into being?" My husband replied, "A woman who only gives birth to daughters is considered barren. A woman is complete when she gives birth to a son, and since you can't, you are barren." He would delegate his tasks to his mother and then come to fight with me. My daughter's name was Rubina. I lovingly called her Baina. She asked me, "Doesn't Dad love you?" I replied, "Dear, a man's love is different. He loves us, that's why he buys groceries for us. But he gets very angry. So, don't say such things in front of him." When I initially enrolled my daughter in school, she topped her class right away. This led my mother-in-law to start taunting me, but my husband remained silent. His silence meant that the decision to educate our daughter was not wrong. My daughter continued to excel in every class. I never thought she could do something that would cause trouble at home, but I was shocked the day her principal and the police came to our house. Luckily, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law was home. I said to them, "Yes, why are you here?" If I didn't recognize the principal, I wouldn't have even opened the door. The principal said, "We need to talk about something urgent regarding your daughter." I asked, "If it's about my daughter, why bring the police?" The principal replied, "The matter is serious." I was terrified, remembering that night. I knew why they were here because it had been the worst day of my life. Early in the morning, my husband's aunt and cousin had visited our home. This was the girl my husband didn't want to marry, but my mother-in-law had wanted him to marry. Our weddings happened back to back. The girl was not prettier than me, and my husband had chosen me for my looks, rejecting his cousin. But now, he regretted it because that cousin had 4 sons. My mother-in-law often taunted my husband, saying, "If you had married Sadia, you could have been the father of these 4 boys. Look now, you don't have a single son. Not only a son, but it seems you don't even have the fortune of having children." I said, "Sadia is out of your reach, but she has a younger sister. She could be yours." My husband then told his mother, "Mother, fear Allah. She is 10 years younger than me." My mother-in-law replied, "Just agree and see. If I talk to my sister, she will be eager to give her daughter to us. We have such a good relationship. By not marrying Sadia, you've embarrassed me in front of her, but there's still time. I can talk to her about arranging her younger daughter's marriage with us. I'm telling you, there's still time. Divorce your wife." Upon hearing this, my heart sank completely. My husband said, "I cannot do that, mother. She is the mother of my daughters. What would become of them if I divorced her? They would be left motherless." This was the first time I heard him say something that showed he cared about his children and loved them. He never bothered whether our daughters had eaten, how they were, or if they were ill. My parents' home was poor, but they still made clothes for my daughters, and I managed their food and care, often staying up nights tending to them when they were sick. My husband then suggested, maybe I should take my wife to see a doctor to find out if there's a problem. After that, you can think about the marriage. I had heard all this, and I had some rights, so I asked my husband about it. He replied, "There's no need to talk more about this. I will take you to the doctor. If he says that you can bear a son, I will give you a year. If you can give me a son within that time, great. Otherwise, I will marry Sadia's younger sister Namin. They only have sons in their family." I retorted, "Oh, really? So Sadia and Namin's children, do they have a different father?" After enduring so much, these words just slipped out of my mouth. But it seemed like that became my crime. My husband started to raise his hand against me. It was at this time when my daughter would return from school. My husband slapped me so hard that I fell outside the door. My elder daughter, Rubina, was there outside, and what she held in her hands made me feel as if the ground beneath me had shifted. I asked her, "What have you picked up?" In a rush, I took her to her room. My daughter then said, "Mom, Dad won't scold you anymore. What he wants, this is it." Seeing everything, my limbs trembled uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do or not to do. I still couldn't escape from my husband's oppression, abuse, taunts, and humiliation. And here, my daughter had brought the apocalypse slips in her hands. Sweating profusely, I told her, "If your father asks where Mom is, say I've gone to Grandma's house." My mother's house was just behind my in-laws. It was situated such that if I crossed one house, I would reach my mother's. Today, that's exactly what I did. I went to my mother's house. She was quite surprised to see me. I told her, "Just don't ask me anything now. Take this. I have to leave right now." My mother said, "Okay, okay. I'm doing something, don't worry, my child. It seems a big storm is about to come your way." I replied, "Mom, the storm isn't coming. It has already arrived because Rubina brought it. Where she got it from, I do not know." My mother, putting her hand on her head, sat down. I realized things were going in a bad direction. I then returned home. Whenever my husband got angry, he would leave the house and only return at night. As soon as I returned home and started working, my hands began to tremble. I told Rubina to change her clothes and eat something. I looked towards the door and saw Nazma entering. She had to come now. Inside, I was dying of worry, and she could probably tell I was very troubled. Although she was my friend, she knew all the neighborhood gossip. There wasn't any news she didn't know about. She had spread the news throughout the neighborhood that my husband was very oppressive towards me. He had gone crazy, repeatedly raising his hand on me for a son. Because of this, my husband had been punished. And now, not only was I not having a son, but I wasn't having any more children at all. I was so quiet that I couldn't even ask her why she was spreading such things about me. Nazma came into the kitchen and asked, "Are you busy?" I replied, "Yes, a bit." Saying this, I resumed washing the dishes and pots. She said, "I have such news that will completely shock you. Isn't there a girls' school in our area? It's about to be shut down, and didn't you enroll your daughter there? She will lose a couple of years now," I reminded her. "You seem to forget that your daughter also studies there." Nazma replied, "What does it matter if she does? Well, she failed 2 subjects last time. I say let the school close so her studies can stop too. That way I can get her married off." I asked, "Why? What happened at the school?" She said, "A big incident occurred at the school. Something happened in the bathroom. My daughter told me everything. Remember Mrs. Mary? She went to the bathroom one day. and soon after, screams were heard. She was screaming terribly. Then she ran to the principal's office, saying something was lying in the bathroom moving. Everyone was worried. What could it be that made Mrs. Mary scream like that? Mrs. Mary took everyone to the girls' washroom, but when they all entered, there was nothing there. Now some people are calling her crazy, while others say that maybe there really was something there that escaped. I asked, "What was it? Do you know?" She replied, "That's why I'm telling you. I've gathered all the news before coming here. Make me some tea in the meantime." As I put the tea on the stove, I urged her, "Tell me, what was it?" She revealed, it wasn't an animal or creature that scared the teacher. It was a human child. Seeing a child in such a situation in the bathroom would scare anyone. That's why she was screaming and ran to the principal's office. But by the time they returned, the child had vanished from the washroom. She kept saying all these things, and fear started to settle in my heart. I tried my best to calm myself down. I asked her, "What do you think this is, and why did it happen?" She replied, "Everyone knows this. This baby is the result of someone's misdeeds. What else could it be? This is a girls' school. Perhaps some girl indulged in immoral acts and gave birth to this child, abandoning it like this. They lack any sense of responsibility, but they are cunning and cruel enough to leave the baby there. But what I can't figure out is where the baby went. Who took it? What happened to it?" By now, the news must have spread across the village. I grew deeply worried. If Rubina's father finds out about this, he will surely say that there is no need to send our daughter to such a school. Nazma said, "Indeed, no girl should study in a school where such incidents occur. Have you ever heard of such an incident before?" I replied, "When I was a child, I heard that a girl from our school ran away from the hostel. We heard it as though something huge had happened. And now see, signs of immorality are emerging within the school. What could be worse than this? I'm telling you, take your daughter out of this school." I responded, "If I take her out of this school, where will I admit her? Other schools are far away, and the commuting expenses are too high. Sending her to school was already a challenge. Now it will be even more difficult." Nazma agreed. "Yes, you are right. Anyway, I have to visit another house now." I said, "Yes, you will surely share this story there too." She replied, "What else can I do? I've asked my husband to buy me a phone so that I can stay at home and watch videos. He said he'll get me one after Eid. I can't sit still at home, so I carry news from one place to another. And why shouldn't I? Neither my daughter nor your daughter has done anything wrong, so sharing this news shouldn't be a problem." I told her, "Listen, Nazma, this is a serious matter. Don't blow it out of proportion, or it might harm you." Nazma replied, "Oh, don't worry so much. Nothing will happen to me. It's almost evening. I'll just visit 2 or 3 more houses and return home." Nazma never paid attention to her own household, children, or family. She spent her entire day sharing news from one house to another. Sometimes, I wondered if this was the purpose of her life. She embodied the stereotypical nosy neighbor often depicted in films. My blood pressure was rising. The missing baby from the school's washroom that Nazma was talking about was actually brought home by my daughter. My innocent daughter believed that her father constantly scolded and blamed her mother because she could never give birth to a son. There were no brothers for the sisters, so she brought the baby boy home, thinking it would make her father stop being angry with her mother and restore harmony in the family. She thought her parents would become happy again like before. Her intention was pure, but she didn't realize the gravity of her actions. If anyone finds out that my daughter brought the baby from the school, they would assume that the baby was hers. I had left the baby at my mother's house. My sister-in-law had recently given birth, so their house had clothes, milk, and diapers for babies. My sister-in-law is a kind person, and she took care of the baby like her own. Now, I only prayed that this news wouldn't reach my in-laws and that no one would find out about my daughter's involvement. Then I would decide what to do with the baby. If needed, I would secretly hand it over to the police, claiming we found it abandoned. When I went to my daughter's room, I noticed her behaving strangely. She seemed to be looking at her stomach and stood up straight upon seeing me. I asked her, "What were you doing?" She replied, "Nothing, Mom." I asked, "Do you know anything about this baby?" She said, "I don't know anything, Mom. I just saw it lying there and brought it home. I thought having the baby would make Dad treat you better." I scolded her harshly and even slapped her. I made her understand how serious her actions were. My daughter cried throughout the night, saying, "Mom, I only brought the baby for you, thinking Dad would treat you well." I scolded her again and said, "If anyone asks you about this, tell them you know nothing." I kept silently praying that no one had seen my daughter bringing the baby home. If someone had, the news would surely have spread by now. I was terrified of Nazma, as she had a habit of talking endlessly about everything. For a moment, I thought of telling her the truth, asking her to keep it to herself. But then I realized that if I told her, she would spread the news everywhere. I was deeply anxious. I spent the entire night on my prayer mat, praying for a solution. My husband, irritated, asked, "What extra prayers are you offering now? Are you praying to God for another child? The doctor isn't available today. Tomorrow morning I'll take you to the doctor and see what they say about your condition." I told him, "The doctor cannot decide my fate, only Allah can. I am content with whatever Allah has planned for me." He asked, "So, are you giving me permission to marry again?" I replied, "Why do you need my permission? You always do whatever you want. You've done it before, and you'll do it again. But I have only one request. Think about your daughters before you act." To my surprise, he fell silent. I had expected him to lash out, but he did nothing of the sort. The next morning, the school principal and the police arrived at my door. My heart sank. I had a feeling they had discovered the truth. I assumed they believed my daughter had taken the baby, which made them think the baby might be hers. They entered the courtyard just as my husband returned home. I began trembling with fear, but my husband said nothing to me in front of them. Instead, he turned to them and asked, "Yes, gentlemen, what brings you here?" He invited them inside to discuss the matter. I told my husband everything. The police then said, "Your daughter was seen taking the baby away. Where is the baby now? We need to speak to your daughter. She has tarnished the school's reputation. We will expel her to protect the school's honor. Why should we let our school's name suffer because of her? A rotten apple can spoil the whole bunch." The principal added, "You always said your daughter was a good girl. This is what your good girl has done to us." At that moment, my husband did something I never imagined. He said, "You're sitting in my house, accusing my daughter without proof. What evidence do you have that she gave birth to this child? Let's go to the hospital right now and clarify everything." Then he turned to me and said, "Bring the baby and come with us. Wear a shawl. Tell Rubina to come too." I brought the baby from my mother's house. They had dressed him well and fed him. He looked healthy and innocent. With the baby, we went to the hospital, where tests proved that neither my daughter nor anyone in my family had any biological connection with the baby. The principal seemed humiliated, as though slapped in the face. They couldn't say a word. My husband declared, "If anyone speaks ill of my daughters, they will have to answer to me. We found the baby and we will decide what to do with him. You may leave now." The police said, "Until we find the baby's real parents, you can keep him with you." My husband replied, "Understood. If the real parents are found, we'll return him to them." My husband handled the situation remarkably well. Even when my mother-in-law questioned him, he managed to convince her without revealing much. Night fell, and the baby was still in my arms. Rubina sat nearby when my husband entered the room. I was scared, thinking he might unleash his anger now that the principal and police were gone. But instead, he approached Rubina gently, held her hand and asked, "My dear, why did you bring the baby home?" His voice was soft, and I was astonished. Rubina replied, "Dad, you always scold and hit Mom. She cries all night because of you, so I thought if I brought the baby home, you'd be happy. You always say you want a son. Look, this is a baby boy. He can be our brother." Tears welled up in my husband's eyes. He hugged our daughter and said, "Yes, my dear, he's your little brother. From now on, he will stay with us." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back my tears. It felt like a burden I had carried for so long had finally been lifted. I looked at my husband, and he gestured to me with his eyes, silently saying that he had no complaints against me. He held my hand, and I broke down in tears. From that day onward, we started raising the baby as our own. Without a doubt, the child was the result of someone's actions. The baby's DNA sample was already taken from the school. One day, when the children went to school, the police came and began collecting DNA samples from the girls. After testing everyone's DNA, they finally identified the baby's mother. However, the very next day, the girl's family left the village to everyone's shock. That family was none other than Nazma's. The baby's mother was Nazma's daughter. Perhaps this was karma for Nazma, who had a habit of spreading gossip from one house to another. She never kept secrets and exposed others' personal matters. She was so busy digging into others' lives that she neglected her own household, failing to notice when her daughter had gotten into such trouble. As soon as the truth came to light, Nazma's family fled the village. Nobody knows where they went. It was as if they vanished overnight, leaving behind all their belongings. Their house was a rented one, and the landlord later revealed that they hadn't paid rent for over a year. The baby is still with us. We named him Abdullah. It's been 2 years since that incident. I am amazed by how my husband treats Abdullah as his own son, showering him with love and care. My mother-in-law often criticizes us for this, but my husband tells me not to pay attention to her. He even took me to a doctor, who said that having children too quickly had weakened my body, making it difficult for me to conceive again. In these 2 years, we haven't had another child, and honestly, we haven't even tried. My husband insists, take care of yourself, focus on your health, and rest properly. We can think about the future later. Now that he has Abdullah, he seems genuinely happy. He also loves our daughters immensely, playing with them, laughing with them, and providing for them. He ensures they have everything they need. Since Abdullah's arrival, something miraculous has happened. My husband's income has increased significantly. Money seems to flow in effortlessly, and he is happier than ever. He adores Abdullah, who calls me Mama, and my husband Baba. When Abdullah toddles toward me on his tiny feet, my heart fills with joy. My husband had always prayed for a son, and now he has one. It's true what they say. Sometimes we don't get what we want, but we receive something far better in its place. That's how we got Abdullah. My little daughter Rubina wanted to help me, and she truly did. Her actions, though unintentional, transformed our lives completely. Now, you tell me, did my husband and I do the right thing, or did we make a mistake? If you enjoyed our story, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click the bell icon. Stay tuned for our next video. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. Allah Hafiz.